Hello, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. On today's show, the transit fare hikes that kicked off mass protests across Brazil have been rolled back. But demonstrators are still on the streets. Could these protests be turning into a movement? Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback as always. There's no shortage of social media on this story, but it was a challenge, Malika, right?
It was a challenge, and that's because most of it, of course, is in Portuguese. It started with the hashtag Muda Brazil, like this tweet here from Pierre says, the new Brazilian identity in one picture. He uses that hashtag, which means change Brazil. And it wasn't until a little while later that we began to see the rise of that hashtag in English, change Brazil. And this was from prominent internet activist Kim.com, who picked up on it and said, people are rising against corrupt governments everywhere. I support hashtag change Brazil. Now, for those of you at home, whether you speak Portuguese, English, or anything else, we want you to join in on the conversation. Just make sure that you use the hashtag AJStream.
And also joining us in the studio, you can see him sitting between myself and Malika, Gustavo Furtado. And Gustavo is a native-born Brazilian and assistant professor at Duke University, where he specializes in the language, culture and politics of Brazil. Gustavo, it's great to have you here in the stream. Looking forward to hearing from Gustavo in just a minute. But we also want to hear from you, our community, and there are so many ways to get in touch with us. For those who prefer more than 140 characters, just hit us up on Facebook. You head there at facebook.com/AJstream, which is where I am right now. You can see all the stories that we're following. You can comment on them, suggest new stories, and hover here and like us.
I'm Ryan Salonen. I'm an actor living in Los Angeles, California, and I'm in the stream.
Scrap the transit fare hikes that caused a massive protest in Brazil. The decision came after almost 2 weeks of protests. Now, in the early days of the demonstrations, police clashed with protesters, and those scenes spread very quickly on Facebook and rallied many in the middle class to join in. For days, people flooded the streets in some of Brazil's largest cities, creating the biggest demonstrations the country has seen in decades. At the height of the protests, 200,000 people filled the streets, and their demands spread from the fare increase to outrage over what they say is billions in public funds being spent to host events like the World Cup instead of improving infrastructure, healthcare, or education. On Tuesday, Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff said that her government heard the protesters and is committed to, and I'm going to quote her here, social transformation. So, now that the fare increase has been scrapped, demonstrators haven't gone home. Could their protest be turning into a new social movement? To help us answer this question, we're joined in our Google Plus Hangout by blogger Rafael Garcia. He was one of the very first protesters on the streets. And also we have Juliana Valagny. She is a journalist who's been covering the protests. It's great to have all of you in the stream today. Rafael, I want to start with you. Can you remember that very first day that you went out to protest?
Yeah, it wasn't really a huge movement that was going on the streets, and the main reason at that moment was about the increase of 20 cents of reais, which would be less than 10 cents of dollars, on the fares of bus, train and metro in the city. But since the beginning, it wasn't just about this 20 cents, but about a discussion of a city, of what kind of city we want, on the right to get around the city, and about city mobility and everything that's connected to it. So the first movement was pretty much about public transportation, but then it started to evolve into something bigger, and different agendas started to pile up against the government initiatives from different shades.
So, Rafael, now the fare hikes have been rolled back, they've been scrapped. So, are you happy now?
Well, I'm not particularly happy at this moment because when both the mayor and the governor of São Paulo declared that they would lower the fares, they said they will have to have cuts on investments. And this is really not what we are up to. What we want is a change of the public transportation, the way the public transportation is ruled in Brazil. What we want is that the companies show us what they are earning with the money that we are putting on
Okay.
transportation.
All right, let me just bring into conversation Bruno Van Honey. He's from the Youth Ministry in the Workers' Party in the current administration. Bruno, you were listening to Rafael just now, so the government and the tax hikes, they've been rolled back. How difficult a decision was that to make?
Well, these protests, they started with this very big demand for access to the cities, public transportation, and we can see that the movement is being built every day because it gained too many people that are claiming for different flags, for different demands. So we look for all of these demands as legitimate, and the government is trying to understand the movement and how to dialogue it with the movement. This fare of the buses was, we think, is only the first part of it. We don't think the bus fare will stop the movement. So we are trying to get in touch with all these movements because they have different kinds of groups, and there are so many cities, more than 200 cities that have
Right.
the protest today.
Okay.
So we are trying to get in touch with these people. They are making a big protest in about half an hour here in Brasilia, and we are expecting to get in touch and have a meeting with them.
Okay.
Gustavo, we just got this interesting tweet I want you to have a listen to. Mohammed writes in, they, meaning the government, never saw it coming. I guess the government will answer Change Brazil in respect of the World Cup hosted by the country. He mentions the World Cup, but I want you to focus on the part they never saw it coming. I'm pulling up on my screen now this vine, and this is a vine, basically hundreds of thousands of people, an estimated 250,000 people filled the streets of cities across Brazil for change. Did they see this coming?
Definitely not them or the media. So what we've been seeing for 2 weeks is an attempt to catch up with events that move way faster than either politicians and their discourse or the media are able to manage. And I think Rafael points out something very interesting, which lowering the bus fare is all well and good, and it's sort of a too late in a way, but it's meeting the initial demands. But they specifically said, and this is not the federal, it's the state and the municipal government of São Paulo. They specifically said, well, this is going to cost money, so the money will have to come from some other place, which comes as a sort of a gift and a threat at the same time. So I think they still don't understand the magnitude of what is happening.
So you mentioned the media. I really want to bring in Juliana here, Juliana, because when you were covering this story or trying to cover this story, something pretty awful happened to you, which is why you've got a bruised eye right now. Just fill us in.
Well, I started covering the protests on Tuesday last week, and on Tuesday we had some violence from both sides, from the side of the protesters and the side of the police too. But it was like concentrated here and there, you know, it wasn't like spread. And then on Thursday, I went there again. And on Thursday, things got really violent from the part of the police. So the police threatened the media workers, the protesters, people got hurt, and including me. I was working, I was watching all things that were happening at that point. And then a police officer, he pointed the gun at me and he shot me in the eye. I got in the hospital for 2 days. I'm getting better now, I can see already. But I think it happened to me, and it happened to a lot of people there who were like victims of the police violence on that day.
I'm glad to hear that you're actually getting better. You're looking a lot better than the original picture that we saw. You were trying to do your job, which was trying to work out what is going on in Brazil with these protests. Now that you've had a few days to kind of look at the fast-moving story, what can you tell us? How can you enlighten us about what's happening?
Well, I think that, like Rafael said, things started with bus and trains fares, but it's not about that, only about that anymore. I think people are insatisfied with a lot of things, with public service in general, and with the costs of the World Cup here. So we see people in the streets telling us a lot of things, a lot of insatisfaction. And that's why I think people didn't move out from the streets when they got the raise in the fares, when they got that back.
I just want to ask you just one quick thing, which is we have a journalist and you're based in Brazil, so we can get the absolute latest from you. What's the latest in terms of what's happening in the streets? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Well, we have here the newspaper I work for, which is Folha de São Paulo, is reporting today that we'll have demonstrations in more than 90 cities here in Brazil today, one day after Rio and São Paulo took back the raise in the fares. And we will have a lot of people in the streets, and I think the leaders of this movement are trying to understand right now how to deal with things, how to put all this insatisfaction together so they won't lose strength, Because if you have lots of things to ask for, you might lose strength in your movement. So I think people are trying to organize themselves right now to maintain this movement and to maintain the strength of this movement.
And I think that's an interesting point that you raised, that if there are lots of things that people are asking for, it could cause it to lose momentum. But you mentioned police brutality, and Rafael, I want you to have some words on that. There's a video comment speaking about that. Let me know what you think.
Now that the raise in transport fares in Brazil was stopped by the growing protest there, I think the next move for the protesters should be to fight against police violence in Brazil. We have a very violent police in all the states, and we have a specific branch called the military police, which resembles what we had in the dictatorship. We had to reform police and assure that not only we fight crime, but we also fight police abuses there.
So Rafael, is fighting police brutality going to be one of the prongs of the protests?
Yeah, actually, one of the main reasons why this protest got so big was exactly the violence. On June 13, which took place, the fourth demonstration of the movement here in São Paulo, was a day of a huge police violence. And after this day, the protest became really huge all over the country. We gathered 20,000 people during this protest, and after this one, 300,000 people in hundreds of cities. So actually, the UN once told Brazil to change the police system in Brazil, and also to put an end to the military police. That we should change the way the police here in Brazil deals with the population. And one of the biggest problems here in Brazil, aside of the inflation, of social inequality, health and education system that is quite poor, is exactly the police violence. And the state uses this violence against the population. And that's something we've learned the worst way. And Juliana learned the worst way here.
It's not just the police, because like Rafael just said, you have the governor of São Paulo almost explicitly asking the police to stop the protests. You have Folha de São Paulo publishing an op-ed piece 2 weeks ago inviting the police to stop what they saw as just an outlaw demonstration with no actual purpose. So it is a political culture that, like Rafael said, uses the police. The police is kind of one part of that machine that is unable to face democracy when it actually presents itself. So I think it's important to kind of nuance that the police is a brutal and a brute instrument, but of a political class that has shown itself to be very callous. And they only backed from their initial position as the protests grew beyond their imagining. So it's interesting to see it in that context, and how is that going to change the political class and the media in the future, not just the police.
Let me bring Bruno back into the conversation. Bruno, the government has to work out what the grievances are. Do you have any grasp of them at this moment from the people who are demonstrating?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question.
Sure. The government has to work out what the grievances are, why people are still demonstrating. Have you got any idea why they're still out on the streets?
I think this is a process that didn't start with this first protest this year, 1 week ago, a few days ago. This is being accumulated during some years. We have every month protests in Brazil from different kinds. And this one touched our society in a different way. We feel like all our society is on that with insatisfaction, like Juliana said, but also about solidarity. I think the people don't think the channels of dialogue or social participation that we already have are enough. They want more. They don't want more people between the government and the society as the institutional powers. So they are trying on the streets not only say about the public policies that we will still need. We did advance in the last 10 years, but we still need a lot of things. One of them is the democracy, that we need to go deeper on that.
Right.
And I think all this process is trying to tell us that, as for us, of the government, we are a popular government. The people on the street, it's a reason of proud for us. They are claiming for rights. That means for us that the conscience in Brazil, it's growing.
Okay.
Not a reason of fear.
Bruno, there's something that's confusing me because I'm hearing reports that members of the Workers' Party, which is the ruling party, they're out on the streets protesting today. I'm confused about what they're protesting about. Can you enlighten me?
Sorry?
I am hearing reports that members of the Workers' Party are protesting today in Brazil. That's confusing for me. What is your party protesting about?
For the same reason, because in this demand, they are asking for more education, more health, the free public transportation, with some things on the Congress. They're called PAC 37. That's a demand of this movement too. The corruption is always a theme, so the Workers' Party was always in favor on that.
Okay.
And that's different from the position of the government.
All
That's
right.
why these days we have many people from not only the Workers' Party, but a lot of parties that are part of the government are on the streets too.
Okay. Gustavo, it's still confusing for me why the Workers' Party would be out protesting. It seemed like this was more of a social protest and social movement.
I think what you have is a political parties attempting to take some kind of possession of this movement or to align themselves with the movement as opposed to being the target of the movement. So I think it's in a strategic way in which we're seeing not just the Workers' Party, but I think every political group or group with a political interest is attempting to somehow push their interests in line with the movement. But at the same time, there's something that we're not discussing that I think is the next impasse, which is the movement has resisted party affiliation and has, in fact, like the chanting on the streets that I keep on hearing my friends who were there describing is sem partido, no party, and has resisted the institutional avenues of the political process in favor of a different kind of politics, much more based on the street. But how do you give a political longevity? How do you get political gains without passing through the institutional channels, and what will those be? I think that's the impasse that we are right now.
That's a great question, Rafael. How do you do that? How do you get momentum and any kind of solidarity and progress beyond fares going down?
Well, first of all, I believe that the presence of the Workers' Party today on the demonstration is just an agenda of they're trying to co-opt the movement. The Workers' Party, the Communist Party, which is also a ruling party here in Brazil, as we couldn't see any flags of those political parties during previous demonstrations. Actually, people from the Workers' Party tried to join during the 4th or 5th demonstration, but people were trying to expel them from the demonstrations. And we have some other leftist parties who took place on the demonstration since the first one. And I'm kind of worried with this no parties, sem partido thing.
Right.
Because actually we can't have more than this momentum without the participation of political parties.
Okay, we're just heading towards the end of this part of the program, and then we're going to pick up in the post-show. But Juliana, this protest is very personal now for you. If you had to sum it up for us, what you've seen so far, bearing in mind your personal injury, what would you say?
Well, I think it's not personal for me because of my injury, because I got that working, so I don't want to personalize things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's a huge momentum we're seeing here in Brazil. It's I'm proud of being here covering that, you know, and I think that people are still trying to understand what's going on. But I think it's huge, and I think it's great.
That's a good point to leave our audience hanging for now before we go to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Before we do that though, Malika has some other stories that we're following.
Gone are the days of awkward run-ins with friends you'd rather not see, thanks to the world's first antisocial network. Born out of an experiment, the app dubbed Hell is Other People allows you to dodge your friends based on geolocated check-ins. On the map, the green points designate safe zones and the orange points indicate someone you know. Its creator took the satirical app for a test drive in New York. Take a look at this.
I'm Scott Garner, and today I am avoiding people. Currently I'm in Washington Square Park. I'm at the East River Park.
After a long day of walking around the city, Garner points out the app's irony. It's only useful if your friends actually check in on another social network, Foursquare. Next up for World Refugee Day, Swedish company IKEA is expanding from furnishing homes to outfitting refugee camps. As part of a partnership with the UN Refugee Agency, IKEA is building flat pack houses with solar panels as an alternative to plastic tents. Lauded as durable shelter, the innovation is aimed at millions of refugees, but comes at no small price, costing nearly $8,000 to make. We moved out to Venezuela, where President Nicolás Maduro is taking it to the streets with Gobierno de Calle, an effort to connect his administration with citizens. Government officials have been tweeting pictures of their community visits throughout the country. However, some are responding with this hashtag, Maduro, Venezuela hates you. Poking fun at the initiative, parody photos like these are making the rounds. This one highlights the pay disparity between military officials and educated civilians. And those are just a few of the stories we're following, so continue to pitch your story ideas using the hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Malika, I love having Gustavo on the set. He's been chuckling in all the right places all the way through your lead section.
They were really good leads today.
You're very good.
He's very social media savvy. I'm looking at some of the websites or the Facebook sites that are part of the Brazilian protests, and there was something about Facebook that was really keeping you glued to this protest. What is it, Gustavo?
So the main thing is how while the media attempts to grasp the movement in the usual ways with kind of a meta narrative of what's happening, what you have on Facebook are these various sites in which you have these micro interventions and this sort of moment by moment engagements that have actually shaped protests. I mean, not just by creating pages in which the protest is scheduled. And for instance, tonight in São Paulo, I think there's 190,000 confirmations for the protests for today. But also things like organizing a medical team among the protesters to be of service during the demonstrations.
And all on Facebook.
Or doing a kind of a vigilance of police brutality and of vandalism, which has often shown to be related to police brutality. I mean, there's often been people that are not part of the movement committing acts. So you have on Facebook great videos of the police observing acts of vandalism.
We have to save a little for the post show.
Oh, sure.
All right. A little excitement still to come at stream.aljazeera.com. He's good. So, what are we going to do on the next Al Jazeera The Stream? Well, there is a battle going on in Vancouver, and it's a battle between the rich and the poor. On Monday, we asked, can Vancouver survive gentrification? You will see us online. Okay. Hello again, it's good to see you on the Streams Post Show. Today we're looking at the protests in Brazil, and to help us with this discussion we're joined by Gustavo Furtado from Duke University, where he focuses on Brazil. Rafael Garcia, he is one of the first protesters on the streets, and also joining us today is Juliana Valani, who's a journalist who's been covering the protests, and from the Youth Ministry, Bruno Van Honey. It's good to have all of you in the stream. I had to stop you midstream, Gustavo, as you were waxing lyrical about Facebook and social media. Would it be too much to say it was critical in these protests?
That's my impression. I think that maybe Juliana and Rafael will have more to say about that, and I'm sure they have more to say about that. But my impression was that it was a much more lively place to follow and to engage with what was happening than any of the other sources, which seemed to always be a step behind the movement.
So, Juliana, do you feel that you, this is difficult to say to a journalist, do you feel that there was more information coming on Facebook and faster than you could actually collect in a traditional way as a journalist?
Well, I think that with the social media, you get the protesters to be media too, you know? And there's hundreds of thousands of people, so they can, I don't know if they can communicate faster, but they sure can communicate more, you know, because there are thousands of people. So I think it's great, actually, that the protesters get to gather, to give their information, you know, real-time information, and help us in the media to do that too. I think it's a public covering of the thing.
Rafael, what's your take on that as a blogger?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because during the demonstrations, I took many pictures of people holding signs saying, "We left Facebook. We are on the streets. We are no longer sitting at home." And it's pretty much the opposite of this activism we are used to see here in Brazil. Like people woke up, really woke up, and even a few TV networks were asking for social media users to send them videos because it was impossible for them to keep up with the stream of information. So social media was really important for this development here in Brazil.
Our community agrees. Betty on Twitter says social media has a massive role and motivates all this to continue. My timeline has never been so politicized. And Betty has been tweeting us about doing the show for days now. So want to get her in there. And thank you very much, Betty, for tweeting in. But I want to go back to some of the demands of the protesters, because that's what people online are talking about now. Rafael, I'm going to direct this one to you. Priscilla says impunity is another core issue. Corrupt politicians, human rights violators are above the rule of law. And we got a video comment, on those same lines. Have a listen to this.
My name is Kelly. I'm Brazilian from São Paulo, and I've been living in New York, and I'm here to explain why Brazilians are so mad at the government right now. That's why we're protesting massively, because we have one of the most corrupt governments in the world. Because there's no punishment for them, they are openly corrupt. We see scandals on TV every single day, money that should go to education and security and health is just going to their own pockets. We are tired enough.
Rafael, she says we are tired enough, and she says it's one of the most corrupt governments in the world, but one of the views that we who are outside of Brazil get is of a much rosier picture. Are we getting the wrong image?
Definitely. And I think corruption is just one of the problems. Actually, it's interesting because corruption is a problem, although our democracy is based on political parties. Who are those? Who are the corrupt ones? Our politicians. So we must have strong political parties in order to try to change something. So I think that's a small problem we have with this: no parties and corruption. And corruption is just one of the problems. We have social inequality, poor health and educational system. We have this huge spend, billions and billions of our money on the World Cup and the Olympics. And there's also some videos on YouTube and many people going on the streets and asking for Brazil to give up the World Cup, to invest this money spent on the World Cup in hospitals, in schools, and in a better system for everyone in Brazil. So there's this really different agendas joining on the protest. And that's actually one of the reasons why I believe this protest will keep going on, with these different groups trying to ask the government, the local government, the state, and the Brazilian government for change.
I think there's a danger here, though, because I think there is a tendency to say that all government is corrupt and that government is entirely failed Brazilians. And I think that's not the only possible narrative, but it's one of the narratives that are emerging from this movement. And I think it's an extremely apolitical and almost conservative discourse, because it shuts down the channels for political change that are institutional. And I don't think that all politicians are equal, or that all parties are equal, and I think they will have evidence that that's not the case. So I wonder if Rafael, if you can comment on that, because I think there's almost an apathy that may come from the sense of it is all so corrupt that why bother?
Yes, no, I do agree with you. This corruption agenda sometimes is right-wing led political agenda. And it is really a problem to say that down with them all, let's change Brazil, let's put different politicians there without discussing that. Even if I have a ticket for speeding up with my car and I give 20 reais for the guard not to give me this ticket, I am corrupt. So why am I doing on the street saying that I'm against corruption? Not only the government is corrupt, and we have really to take care about this speech of only corruption. I really agree with you, Gustavo.
Bruno, let me just bring you in from the youth ministry, from the Workers' Party, which is the ruling party in Brazil. What are you going to do next? You have people out on the streets demonstrating about a number of different issues. What happens next?
Well, I think it's really hard to figure what will happen next. Because, as I said to you before, it seems to us that this movement is being built every day. So, on the social media and in meetings, a lot of cities started to try to get a coordination of these movements. So, we are expecting that the flags, the demands, get more clear and trying to guarantee the security of the protests, to get no violence, and trying to figure out how the government can answer the questions are already cleared. So, but as I think Gustavo said, the military police, the responsible of that are the governors. So the president of the republic is already asking them to guarantee the security, to get no violence, to guarantee a peaceful manifestation, because we already saw the major parts of the protests are peaceful. We have just a little groups that are trying to get violence and call for attention in different ways that are not helping anyone.
Okay.
But until now, we are very happy because most of the countries that had these huge manifestations, these huge moments, they were already counting bodies. And until now, we are not counting bodies.
Right. All right. So, Gustavo, you're watching everything that's going on back home as an immigrant here in the US. What is that like for you?
It's a little bit anguished right now. It's sort of it's such a great moment in Brazilian. I think this is a great moment in history. I think it's going to be looked back as one of the great moments of our democracy, and I would like to be there right now. And it's all happening so fast. It's been 2 weeks, and 2 weeks that nobody predicted. So I have a certain amount of envy even for my friends who are there, and I'm happy that they keep on posting and sharing what is happening.
You always have Facebook.
I at least have Facebook.
And of course, in the meantime, Brazilians have the eye of the whole rest of the world who are watching. There's a Facebook comment from Busi who says, "We're watching you so proudly. Please be strong. Keep demanding your rights. Never give up struggling. Greetings from Turkey. Occupy Brazil. Occupy Turkey."
Ooh, that starts a whole new conversation,
doesn't it?
Which we're not going to have because we're out of time. I have to say thank you very much to all of our guests, to Rafael Garcia, who was part of our program. He's a blogger, and also to Juliana Valanese. She is a TV journalist who was actually hurt during the protest as she was covering the story. To also Gustavo Furtado, who was here in the studio, and also to Bruno Van Honey from the Youth Ministry. Thank you very much for helping us understand the protest in Brazil just that little bit better. So, where do we go next? Well, on Monday's show, there is a battle going on in Vancouver between the rich and the poor. So on the next AJ stream, we ask, can the city survive gentrification? That is a great discussion for another day. Until then, you'll see us online. Thanks for watching.